say hello, everyone, and welcome to this radcast of the Social Club at the end of this world and the beginning of the new. I'm Jamin Shively. Very excited to see everyone today. We're going to start with personal updates, and in addition to that, I'll ask a new guest of ours, Jean-Francois, to provide kind of a brief introduction to yourself, and then we'll talk about, or as long as you'd like, really, and then we'll kind of give a brief overview of the Social Club, chat about that a little bit, and then we can open up to we can talk about an agenda, what we actually want to talk about. So, but first, let's go with personal updates, starting with Adam. Take it away, Adam.
Oh, thanks, and hello, everybody. I'm Adam Soul. So I've been working on this new website called aworldwithoutmoney.org, and I'm the guy that thinks that money acts on humanity like a poison. And so by visualizing this, I've seen things that people don't normally see. And I think it's the mindset that mankind has changed. And so lately I've been having some emotional issues with friends and family that just don't get it. And it's made me realize that it's a learning curve. So I mean, we are taught this society that we're raised in, our school, our education systems, all our history, we only go back to the times that mankind is of civilization. We never compare the 300,000 years that we lived as hunter-gatherers. And that mindset, when we left the hunter-gathering life and changed to become civilized, our mindset changed, because we went from our sustenance of life as hunter-gatherers was directly from nature. But when we changed, our sustenance now is artificial, because we depend on money now, which gives us a proxy setup. And we really depend on nature, but our reality, our artificial reality, says that we depend on money, which allows us to destroy and sell nature and turn animals into dollar bills. So from this perspective is where I'm developing my world without money. And so I am looking for interviews, and Dr. Rao, I'm hoping to be able to do that, but it's taking a little bit longer than I thought to get this website going. There's a lot to it, and being the basic order is the main thing. So, and that's what I'm doing. And thank you very much.
Awesome. I'm going to practice breathing before speaking. Love it. Oh my goodness. All right. Up next, if you're ready, Jean-Francois, I invite you to give an introduction to yourself and anything you'd like to share. Thank you.
So first, I feel very happy, very glad to join you for the first time. So I've worked in the field of collective intelligence and the evolution of our species and consciousness for the past 20 years. Before that, I had a corporate life, and before that, I had other lives. So collective intelligence has turned into a new research field that studies how living systems work. Any kind of living system, not just humanity, but ecosystems and colonies and bacteria, everything. But of course, looking at humanity helps us and gives us very, very precise insights about where our species will likely evolve if we don't have a collapse before, of course. And I like to study this both as a scientist, but also by giving myself an experimental life. That means once we know a little bit of the physics of the next world to come, then we can start training ourselves, we can start hacking ourselves to see how we can become a human being or a post-human being, whatever we want to call it, in the next world. I like to give conferences named, from Homo sapiens to Holo sapiens, because I really see that kind of evolution happening. I've also committed myself to building and contributing to building the next post-monetary world. That means a world, a world without money, which doesn't mean a world without currency, because we make the distinction between money as one form of currency among millions of other forms that we can design. And I feel absolutely passionate about building infrastructures and technologies that will make circular economy and a vegan world and a compassionate world a natural thing, a natural outcome, so that we don't need, kind of highly advanced or conscious people to kind of envision that, but it just happens naturally by emergence in society, and we can design those things specifically by designing the right currency systems. Not only that, but those things as well. I travel a lot. I give lots of conferences around the world, both to talk about collective intelligence and to talk also about my experimental life that people seem to feel curious about. I also advise decision makers in this world, those who know that becoming the head of some pyramidal structure won't make it no matter what. And so they have some deep questions about themselves, of course, as human beings, but also how they can make the next moves on a strategic level as well. And to finish, maybe today's insight, listening to what Adam said. Adam, you may enjoy watching a TEDx conference, a TEDx talk that I gave in Paris a few years ago in French, but you will find the subtitle called After Money. And I spoke specifically about a post-monetary world that will very likely happen in the next few years. And you talked about how we get access to wealth, and wealth not to confuse with money, but true wealth. And I started this conference by having everyone in the room, about 1,200 people in the room, breathing with a straw. And so they would access air with a straw, which would make air scarce. And I asked them then to move and to dance by breathing through the straw. And of course, very quickly, you don't have enough oxygen in your body, so you cannot dance, so you cannot involve yourself without exercise. So that people could realize that if, it creates two things. First, it creates an incentive to take someone else's straw, because if I have 2 straws or 3 straws in my mouth, of course, I can do whatever I want, and maybe I can give you one so you can work for me, and so on. So it creates, social hierarchies by emergence because of this scarcity model that we have. And pyramidal collective intelligence needs scarce currency called money. The second thing, if you got born in this world with a straw in your mouth and you forgot that you have a straw, you may build a philosophy of scarcity in the world, believing that we live in a scarce air around us, because you forgot that only the tool that you have in your mouth makes it scarce. And so scarce currency makes wealth scarce artificially. So we can build sufficient currencies in the world in the near future. And I feel totally committed to that. I feel complete. Thank you.
Beautiful. I'm going to practice breathing before speaking, as I was taught by Jean-Francois. All right. Beautiful. Up next, Dr. Rao, and welcome, Alex. Welcome, Dan. I'll invite either of you to give updates if you wish in a couple of moments. And thank you, Adam, for monitoring YouTube, and thanks to everyone who's watching. And up next, Dr. Sailesh Rao. Take it away, Sailesh.
Yes, it's been a great week. My update is that I got a chance to speak to 1st through 3rd graders in San Jose, California, about 180 of them. And they wanted to know about climate change and the earth, and how to deal with what they're hearing all around them. So it was a fantastic conversation. Getting them on board and getting them to see that kindness to all life is the core of what we need to be doing, and which is very much aligned with who they really are to begin with. And it was a pleasure to spend time with you, Jamin and Melissa, in Berkeley. and we had a great time talking about things, and at the Sierra Club dinner, getting the Sierra Club to start seeing that there is another way. So I'm looking forward to coming back to the Sierra Club and seeing a vegan dinner being served there. Yes. Thank you very much. That's my update.
Beautiful. Thank you, Silas. All right. Up next, my sister Victoria, who we also nicknamed Hurricane Victoria appropriately.
That's
right.
me, Tornado hub today. Things are jumping in Tulsa. I've been in the shelter once today, and they say I'll be there again. So I had an interesting conversation at a coffee shop that I wanted to just give a 20-second overview. I had something on my computer about climate, and a gentleman who was taking a break works for, of course, most things in Oklahoma are oil and gas related, but works for one of the really huge companies. And I asked him, I said, how do you feel about fracking? And it was an interesting look. He basically said, well, you know, do you want what I think or the company line? And I said, isn't that it? We have that ethical decision. And he said, yes. And how do I stay here? Support my family. So it was a kind of an open conversation, which I thought was pretty extraordinary because as I've spoken about for the last year, those conversations don't happen a lot here, where oil and gas is how everybody makes a living. Also, I read, maybe some of you all did as well, this morning, the latest poll that on the Democratic side, 82% of all registered Democrats say climate crisis is the #1 issue, second to healthcare. So I think that's the first, and I think that's huge news. So thank you all for being here, and for anyone watching. And here in Oklahoma, things are just, the truth is finally being talked about. So at a coffee shop yesterday, I got into a real discussion about it, which was kind of an interesting thing to see. Thanks.
Wow. Beautiful, beautiful, Victoria. Thank you for that. All right. Well, anyone else who'd like to give an update who hasn't given an update yet, now is a great time to jump in. Dan, looks like you're ready to go. So take it away, Dan.
Yeah, Dan from Chicago, and I don't, in a way, I don't have a lot to update in a substantive manner, but of course, I continue to have conversations with people about local political issues in Chicago, which tangentially relates to a lot of what's going on in the world and climate change. I also have found that people are becoming, a little more open to the realization that a crisis is happening and that it's going to worsen. However, I continue to come up against, there's a certain wall of denial. I've stated this again and again at the social club and other places when it comes to dealing with the reality of exponential climate change. Most of the people that are now becoming, kind of awake to the fact that things aren't going well. There's too many weather systems that kind of put the empirical reality in front of you. There's also, yes, the Democratic candidates are starting to talk about climate change that puts them in opposition to Trump. Trump, total denial, and maybe he knows something, but anyway, on the surface, total denial. And so they're going to, kind of bring it up and try to run on it. But again, most of the candidates, probably all of them, fundamentally believe that it's a linear problem. It's a linear problem. You've got 10 years, 20 years, whatever. The inability to discuss the possibility of a very attenuated time span continues to be a problem. And I'll just say two more things and I'll be done with my introduction. what's come over me is, and it's hard. It's hard. I'm not throwing in the towel, but when I look at the problems that seem to be going on, for example, we have here, I'll just use the United States, it's applicable in other parts of the world. We have Christian fundamentalists in this country, like Mike Pence, Mike Pompeo, many, many others, in positions of power, who do believe that basically it's in God's hands. The omnipotent, omniscient God, if he chooses, could clean this up immediately. Or, on the other hand, if it's God's will that the end times finally come, then that's what's going to happen. That incentivizes inaction. And there's no getting around that. You know, it's not like, you know, people sometimes, it almost seems like they're imagining that we do not have people in positions of power who actually believe this. And it's the same thing in the other religions, you know, very, very similar thing. That's one thing that's very, very hard for me to have to, I guess, accept. The other thing is, you know, as I stated last week and previously, Peter Wadhams, who I think we could all agree is one of the top experts on climate change, particularly the Arctic. He has stated that in order to scale up interventions to draw down the greenhouse gases out of the atmosphere, to really scale it up and to refreeze the Arctic, it takes, talking about money, $1 zillion to do it. I forgot whether he said tens of trillions or even more than that, probably. The point is that as long as we have this tribalism going on between nations, China, Russia, United States, etc., then they keep building up their militaries because they actually believe that if the other tribe had the power, they would completely destroy or take over the other country or tribe. And so we're locked in, you know, we're locked into this dynamic, which we've all, you know, as Guy McPherson says, been born into. So I'm just coming to, you know, kind of realize that if we do have an exponential time frame, not some linear frame, which is going to go on, plenty of time to figure things out, convert people to rationality, etc. If we can't really get that out there in the corporate media, okay, sorry, but anyway, I just wanted to unload that. It's really kind of where my head has been this past week. All right, I'm done.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you. All right. Anyone else want to give an update before I give my update, or even after I give my update? Feel free to jump in. All righty. Well, I'll give my update. Been traveling a lot. Last week was in California, and we had a really beautiful Sierra Club dinner at which Dr. Sailesh Rao was one of the main speakers. Also, Professor Guy McPherson was one of the main speakers, and also Dr. Matthew Fox of Order of the Sacred Earth was a main speaker. And we then, after all the speakers presented, we took a brief intermission and then had a really beautiful big round circle conversation about all of this, in which, Dan, the very points that you made were all brought up, and along with many others, and it was just a really beautiful meeting. The next day, on Friday, we had a big meeting with with MAHB, M-A-H-B, the Millennial Alliance for Humanity and the Biosphere, which was started by Professor Ehrlich at Stanford, Paul Ehrlich, and that was another really powerful meeting. And at both of those meetings, I made the case for collective intelligence and the urgency for us to actually manifest a planetary collective intelligence, utilizing various information and communication technologies, including artificial intelligence. But at the very root of it, the very core, the heart of it, would be human intelligence and collective human intelligence, just as we're manifesting right here on the Social Club. Now, the Social Club for me is a kind of a bit of a precursor to a much more structured and much farther reaching whole network of conversations, series of conversations, and open source co-creation. From the ideation stage to the design stage to the modeling and optimization stage, and finally to the implementation stage of solutions. All the myriad solutions that we need, from big solutions like the whole world going vegan to components of that solution being, you know, the 3-minute videos, the 20-minute TED Talks, the memes, and other modes of information that can go viral that bring people into the conversation and expand their awareness. So everything from big physical geo-shading solutions and refreezing the Arctic, as Dan was mentioning, to the very soft tissue cultural solutions of cultural transformation, including co-creating a whole new story for humanity. All of that is on the table. All of that is totally vital. And so I've been making a case for that. And now, since then, traveled to Mexico with my partner, Melissa. We're here visiting with family here, currently in Jalapa, toward the east coast of Mexico, in Veracruz. And earlier this morning, had a really wonderful hour and 40-minute video conference with Silas and Shelly and Jan, who joined us, I guess, a couple weeks back on the Social Club, about precisely architecting and developing this platform for collective intelligence. And I'm just so excited for all the great folks who Silas is inviting into the conversation around that. In other news, prior to coming back to the United States, I was in Spain with Michael, and we did some exploratory implementation of the promotion of Pope Francis and the Laudato Si, the Pope's encyclical, as part of a larger effort that Jamie and Melissa and Michael and I and others are working on to engage the Catholic Church, the entire Catholic community of 1.2 billion Catholics around the world, and inviting and encouraging Pope Francis to lead us, starting with the Laudato Si as a starting point. And of course, the common theme throughout the Laudato Si is, in fact, collective intelligence. Pope Francis is calling on all of us to come together in precisely this nature of dialogue to figure out and co-create all of the solutions that we need as part of, to use his words, a bold cultural revolution to transform society and to save life on Earth. So we had a very interesting time. We were in the southeast of Spain and the northwest of Spain, and we had this giant flag on top of a 10-foot pole that I was carrying around, and that says Laudato Si, just opening up the conversation. Part of that exploration led us to the conclusion that, you know what, in Spain, people just aren't that interested in jumping into a conversation that's based on a religious, point of entry, being the Laudato Si. And so from there, Michael had the insight, look, why don't we go to London where Extinction Rebellion is happening and join the conversation there? So we've been talking and planning around that. Now, the more recent conversations from earlier today about building out the platform for collective intelligence based on the great work of Shelly and Jan and others has me thinking that, to paraphrase Abraham Lincoln, I think, who said, if I had 8 hours to chop down a tree, I would spend the first 7 sharpening the axe. And so where my mind is and heart are gravitating towards now is that we really need to get this platform for collective intelligence built, made operational, and then with that, we can invite the world, including all the folks who are drawn to Extinction Rebellion, to join the conversation, join our platform, and join the collective intelligence so we can figure all this out. So with that, is there anyone else who would like to give a personal update before we enter into the general discussion? All right. I would like to, by the way, we have just a couple comments on sort of how the operational flow here at the Social Club works. People indicate that they want to talk. I maintain the queue. Adam has put himself into the queue. Victoria, looks like Victoria just I'm not sure if she has to get into the tornado shelter, which she told us she might have to do, but anyway.
Yes, I do. I hopefully will be back.
Okay, Victoria, we'll be here. We'll be here. All right. So Adam, please take it away. Adam's up next. And by the way, we have kind of a soft target to cap personal comments. I mean, not personal comments, but just individual comments or even monologues at roughly 5 minutes, but it's not a hard rule. So if you're really on a roll and you pass through the 5-minute mark, you know what? That's okay. Just take a deep breath and keep going. And I hold up 5 fingers for 5 minutes, 6 fingers for 6, 4 for 4, etc., just to kind of help just give people an indication. And Jamie would love to hear from you, brother, and Jean-Francois in a few minutes as well. But first, I'm going to turn it over to Adam, who's next in the queue. Take it away, Adam.
Oh, thanks, Jamin. So I don't work for Jamin, but I am all for the organized. Everybody has a lot of good ideas for how to save the world, but we don't have any place to organize these things. And on a platform, we can use the modern technology that we've never had before. We can use an artificial intelligence, and we can do it in a safe way that for the purpose of saving the world. And on the platform, we can also use a technology that that allows mankind or humanity to speak and face to face all over the world without a language barrier, because we can use language transition, instantaneous language transition programs. And this is something that humanity has not had since the Tower of Babel, according to the Bible. I mean, it's, you know, so that's a pretty good, so what we do is it creates a process of attraction. And the reason I think that all the environmental groups, and there's a whole lot of them, that have been unsuccessful, it's not that their heart isn't in the right place, it's because they're not organized. It's because they're all going in their own individual directions, and we really need a platform that's the hub for saving the world. So you can go there, and there'll be a whole list of links to all the environmental groups could be connected in this platform, and it could even have a calendar. And anyways, I'm on my website, A World Without Money. I'm going to kind of do up my own little mini mock platform sort of thing, and help get people turned on to the idea. And what brought me into this to begin with is this platform idea, because I think that money is a poison, and it's really a hard concept to get to people, to get out to people, but it should be evaluated. Like I said, there's a lot of different ideas. You know, how are we going to refreeze the Arctic? How are we going to handle global dimming? What are we going to do to eat? All these different ideas need to go in a central place where they can be evaluated. And using the AI and collective intelligence is the best way that I can see to evaluate these things. And in this way, money, our use of money can be evaluated. I mean, everybody looks at money or says, well, a lot of people say that money is a problem. So they say, well, we have to develop a different system of money. And my take is that the use of money sets up an artificial world, a reality. It you know, like I said before, it makes us, it reacts like a poison to mankind. And it causes us to have our sustenance, instead of our sustenance coming from nature, our sustenance comes from money. So it really comes from nature, but we think it comes from money. So it sets up an artificial balance, and it creates a scenario where people are not able to fit in. So I'm for it, and I'm looking forward to getting my website out there. So thank you very much.
Beautiful, Adam. I'm practicing breathing before speaking. All right. Jamie, love to hear from you if it's a good time for you. All right. Take it away, Jamie, if that was a nod.
Yeah, hello everyone. Can you hear me? Okay. Welcome and greetings to all my old friends and new friends. I don't have a lot to update, so I'm not going to get into that. I had a shoulder injury that it's taking me out of the game for a little bit, but I'm going to have surgery and that'll be taken care of. One thing that's been coming to me in the last since around Easter and the shootings, the murders, the terrorism attacks that are happening globally on our religious communities, our sanctuaries, if you will. I don't want to bum anybody out, but I'm getting a sense that the unraveling has begun, and the disenfranchised are now working together in a collective intelligence way on the dark web. Not to make light of it, but the crazies are feeding on each other, and holy people and good people are suffering. And this concerns me greatly. And some of the topics that I've already heard today from the people that have spoken, we're all sort of circling around the same place. We definitely need to get this platform going. Time is of the essence, because I think the destruction of civilization is going to become as much of a threat as climate change is growing. People are seeing end of times scenarios, and they are then acting on that. So that's a serious concern from a safety. And I, for one, am now leery. I live in Cleveland, Ohio. It's heartland. Okay, I'm afraid to go to public places, and I go, but everybody shouldn't have to be fully aware of situational awareness like we're all in the Marines 24 hours a day. That's an unacceptable way for us to live together as humans. And we have to come together, the people that are willing, that are kind, that want a better way in this format and in bigger formats. I'm beyond the shooting scenarios that are distressing everybody, and people are dying. Good people in the houses of worship are being killed. It's just unfathomable that there's this much rage blowing into the winds everywhere. I'm watching the Venezuela country cave in today. With the military driving over their citizens in tanks, driving on top of their citizens. We remember in China 35 years ago when one man stopped the barrage of tanks. Now fast forward 35 years, and we have another uprising, and the tanks are driving over the citizens. So there's been a very significant change in the way people are viewing each other. Very significant. And I do think what Adam Soul said, and Jamin and Dan and everybody, I think we're up against a pretty big monster of money, because there's people watching Venezuela come apart, and they're going to make billions of dollars on these coups on all different sides, and getting people to reset out of the mindset of the pyramid, the straw. Breathing with the straws was an incredible analogy. We've got to find a way to get us together, and I believe it's collective intelligence. And I believe that this so far 2019 and the last 5 years have been a precursor to the bad things that are coming. And what we can't guard against, but we have to be aware of is that I have nothing to lose. The people that have nothing to lose are going to create the most damage. And we've got to find a way to get this platform up and running so people have hope, because I am sensing, I come from a high security clearance in the federal government, Department of Justice, and they talk about these sort of things a lot, but not to this degree. I am sensing a shift as I see personal tribal destruction at a level that I've never seen, and I'm 55 years old. I've never seen anything like this. This is like the whole world is becoming Vietnam. We all remember back during the Vietnam era, right down the road from me is Kent State University, okay? That was the first big freak out moment. Now 45, 50 years later, I'm watching people on TV right now getting driven over by the tanks that they pay for. The people in the tanks are driving across children. And I don't mean to be doom and gloom. I want to be positive, but I just wanted to get those feelings out there because I feel that we have to keep our eye on the ball. We've got to find a way to get funding and to make this work, because I do not have faith that the governments have the capacity to see beyond their own selfish interests. I don't see it. I could be wrong, but I think we need the people to stand in front of the tanks and we got to come together. That's all I can say. We got to come together. And welcome back, Victoria. Thank God you didn't go to Oz. You're here. That's good. And I'm going to go on mute. I just wanted to say to everybody, the urgency I'm feeling as I watch the world unravel and the hopeless taking hope from others in churches and mosques, wherever they are. I drove to see my son and granddaughter the other day, and down the corner from his street is a Mace Mosque. It's an Islamic temple. Normally it's quite quiet. The other day when I drove by, there was a police car in the parking lot, obviously assigned to be in the parking lot while the worship services are going. And I come from a security background, so I get that. But I also come from a human being background, and I think we have no place left that's safe if we have to arm the houses of worship. If we have to put policemen and electronic metal detectors because the fabric of society is unraveling, and the only refuge left for all of us could be a church when the world comes to an end and we're no longer safe there, that's a paradigm shift. And we need to be cognizant of that. We need to find people that feel that way and figure out a way to build this out, because we are losing a very critical, whether you're religious or not, it makes no difference. You know, when I'm in a hospital visiting someone, I go sit in the chapel. I find solace and peace. We all need reflection places, okay? And those are being taken from us. And I don't think that should be ignored. We've got to get this thing out of neutral and get it in first gear. Going on mute.
Wow. Wow. Amazing, Jamie. Thank you. I just want to make a quick comment, and then I'd like to invite Jean-Francois to speak. My quick comment is that, first of all, I could not agree with you more, Jamie. You have really summed it up beautifully, the urgency of making this collective intelligence a reality. The quick comment I want to make is that once we get it into first gear, that's the really hard transition, is getting it into first gear. Once we get it into first gear, and I'm just going to throw a quick visual up on the screen. Let me just make sure I get it ready. And then I'll share it, and then I'll wrap up so that Jean-Francois can speak. Here it is. I'm doing a screen share really quickly. It's a conceptual image that I'm going to show of two things. One is the platform for collective intelligence, which I represent as this little blue box. Imagine that's like the technological platform for collective intelligence. And then on top of that can grow this thing. It's supposed to depict a brain, and that represents the actual collective intelligence that grows on top of the platform. Now, that actual collective intelligence can grow and grow until it's essentially limited by the platform itself. But here's the beautiful thing. That actual collective intelligence can configure itself to design and build the next generation of the platform, the next blue box, which can support a much greater collective intelligence, which can then in turn design and build the next generation platform for collective intelligence, which can support a much greater intelligence. And you see where this is going. It's exponential growth. So even though it may feel like we're a little bit late to the game, to getting this going. Once we get into first gear, I foresee a very rapid succession to second, third, fourth, fifth, etc. gears. And with that, I'll invite Jean-Francois to speak. Thank you.
Well, thank you for everyone's sharing and concern, and I could feel the deep concern and the love that creates this those emotions that I could feel very deeply. I may have a slightly different narrative on my side that I can, put on the table, not to contradict anything, but just to add up that on the table, and you can look at it, of course, the way you want. A narrative coming from my research work on collective intelligence. First thing, we have to study history a lot in this discipline, and as far as I can look, we have always had, religious slaughtering or leaders exploiting people, and actually this makes the signature of what we call pyramidal collective intelligence. Pyramidal collective intelligence that we can define with 4 criteria. 1, a centralized power, regardless whether we have elected people or dictators or whatever. Centralized power, that means a small group of people making decisions. Then we have labor division. That means, of course, you have to divide the work so that individuals can accomplish that kind of work. Connected with what we call a chain of command. Of course, once those guys have made those decisions, then they need to go through a chain of command where labor division will apply. And fourth, what we call a scarce currency. Scarce currency that has another name that we know very well, money. And the scarcity triggers social hierarchies by a law of distribution called Pareto effect. Pareto effect. I can come back to that later if you want. So it just has some pure physics in this. And as long as we will have pyramidal collective intelligence at play, it doesn't matter whether we talk about the Egyptians or the Chinese, ancient China or modern China, or the Western world, or the past or the present. Pyramidal collective intelligence will always have this kind of issues that we know. Now, we may have accepted pyramidal collective intelligence in the past because at some point it worked in an infinite world. But when we have so much of this in a systemic round planet, then it creates an explosion of systemic complexity that pyramidal collective intelligence cannot embrace itself. We need the next stage of collective intelligence that we call holomidal collective intelligence. Holomidal, you find the Greek root holo, like holistic. So in my own words, I don't say we need collective intelligence because we have collective intelligence. Life has collective intelligence. Our cells working together have collective intelligence. An ecosystem has collective intelligence. A government and a pyramidal organization has what we call pyramidal collective intelligence. But we may want to now support the natural emergence towards the next form of collective intelligence that can really embrace the level of complexity that we need to deal with in this world. And that means systemic thinking, of course. We cannot think in a linear way. That needs also going beyond the rational and becoming trans-rational, which we can explore at an individual level, but it leads to another question. How can we become trans-rational, go beyond the rational at a collective level? What kind of practice does it take? How do we have to change our social codes? What kind of technologies can support this? And then also, what kind of technologies can support what we call augmented social intelligence? Because current social intelligence won't do the job. We need augmented social intelligence. That means a way to build a collective awareness, collective knowledge, and more distributed decision makings with more feedback loops in the system that any institutions so far have done or realized. So just bringing those questions on the table. I don't mean to take the whole for a reflection. And back to what I said earlier, I don't feel that much interested in all the drama today. Of course, we have lots of things happening. I totally understand, but the news also kind of super amplify those things. And yes, people get killed in churches and mosques and everywhere. but also hundreds of thousands of people die of, bad nutrition because of too much salt or too much sugar or too much fat or all these things. And we don't talk that much about those things as well. So we could go on and on and on about the bad news. I feel super interested in not so much news, but the transition between pyramidal and holomidal itself, apart from the news. I feel complete.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jean-Francois. All right. Well, no one is in the queue right now. So what we can do is, looks like Dan and I'm sorry, Dan and Adam. I stand corrected. I'm sorry about that. Didn't see that. So Dan is up next, followed by Adam. Take it away, Dan.
Yeah, thank you. So just some thoughts that have been coming as the conversation moves forward. I think that, I've always been a believer that, Jamin, again, I remember back when, social clubs spun off of that meeting at the Sierra Club back with you and Guy McPherson, and you were presenting, the collective intelligence, radical collective intelligence. I do think it's important to have something of this nature, but I really think that let me give a kind of micro example of a problem. Here in the United States, we have had for a long time now, for a number of years, very, very dissociated narratives about what reality is in the country. We have had the corporate mainstream media narrative, mostly concerned with Donald Trump and political issues. We have had what I'm going to just generalize and call the alternative right-wing narrative, which is completely different. And it centers again around Donald Trump. So, if we had so here's the problem with the two narratives. Right now, what's happening in the country is, Donald Trump, because the Mueller report has exonerated him in the sense of any legal prosecutions. He is now going to short term be greatly empowered, because what is going to probably happen, and this is in this other alt-right narrative totally, a little bit on Fox News, which is corporate media, is that the people in the Justice Department, the people in the FBI and some in the CIA who have tried to exercise a soft coup, as they call it, to bring down Donald Trump, are now going to be prosecuted themselves. This is going to become a dominant story. But if you are in the other mainstream news narrative, you have no idea of what is actually coming. And I think that we need to be able to, each narrative as we have it now, both of which are actually to a certain degree false, because there's no integration, there's no synthesis of things. And what we need to be able to understand is that the alt-right narrative has many, many important themes that are intrinsic to human nature. And the other narrative does too. And being able to put forth some sort of a synthesis, which is as true as we could possibly have it, is really important. Because right now, as I said earlier, we have problems with the tribalism and the military. The military, the whole idea of having a military is to protect tribal interests, whether that's on a national basis. In some cases, it might be a religious basis. That's what a military is about. And this tribal, which we're all hardwired with, it ultimately becomes psychopathic. It's all about being the predator that succeeds. Nobody wants to be the prey, and the idea of building up a military to a point where no one can just simply take it out is really critical to how we operate. And so we need to be able to talk about that. I mean, these militaries exist for that purpose. Most of the wealth, one way or the other, goes into military intelligence communities and into the corporate interests, the corporations, which are all part of it. And that just absorbs all the wealth. So if we have a situation where exponential climate change is a high probability, we can't put off talking about the constraints, what holds us back from really getting anything done. They're not going to go away. Now we can have a platform, and that would be great. That would be great to have the platform. But if we aren't able to penetrate into some things that people, are hardwired with, and it's not going to probably be able to go very far. And I just want to say one thing about money, because I know that comes up. Money, on one level is a medium of exchange. The problem isn't necessarily so much money. It is the kind of unchained greed and selfishness which exists. And again, all of us are capable of becoming psychopathic. It's not just, a few natural born psychopaths that, are that way as kids, and just grow up that way. Every human being can become that way if they're put in a cultural environment which incentivizes it. And that's what we have now in any country in the world that operates with the neoliberal orientation concerning economics and policy. And so, again, pretending that this isn't happening is a huge mistake. I just wanted to throw those things out there. Okay.
Wow, thank you, Dan. Beautiful. I just want to make a quick comment. First, a question to Victoria. Were you raising your hand, Victoria, to enter the queue? Okay, no problem. So to your point, Dan, that we've got these major barriers of tribalism and this culture, this military culture, and also per Jean-Francois, the pyramidal collective intelligence. These are major barriers, but I just wanted to say that as we build out the collective intelligence platform and the actual collective intelligence that rides on top of that and draws strength from it, we can figure out a way to transform ourselves from Homo sapiens to Holo sapiens, per Jean-Francois. And that is such a radical transformation that I think it will address holistically all of these major concerns, including tribalism. With that, Adam is next in the queue. Take it away, Adam.
Oh, hi. Yeah, I wanted to complete a thought that I was getting into. And Jean Franz, mentioned something about our history says that people have always been slaughtering. Well, I just wanted to do a real quick screen share here and show you guys something that we don't think about. Now, you see this graph? This is a population chart. Anthropologists tell us that we started actually 315,000 years ago. We originated from Africa as the Homo sapien species of life that we intelligent people. And about 5,000 to 7,000 years ago, our population started rising, and it's never gone back down. Well, during this time, see, we don't, our history, when we, at least as far as I know, we are only taught about mankind after we reach this point. this is the point where we started becoming civilized. And so we only compare back to here. This portion we're not really talked about. We're not educated about it. So and a lot of people have misconceptions, but I've done quite a lot of study on this, on the anthropology of humanity. And these people weren't swinging from trees. They were intelligent people like us. And the difference between them and us is they had a different mindset. And of course, this population graph only goes up to 1 billion. So if you, this is what it looks like in perspective today. So we lived on Earth all this time, and in harmony and with the Earth. So with nature. So something happened at that point that caused our mindsets to change. And the first form of money was we changed from hunters and gatherers to planters and herders. And when we made this change, especially herding, it caused a change in the mindset of mankind. Because before, we would kill the animals with respect. We would bury the heart of the mastodon next to the mastodon. We did it. We had reverence and respect for the earth, for nature. We got our sustenance straight from nature. But when we started planting and herding, especially herding, we had to have a different mindset, because herding caused us to kill the animals. We would make friends of them. We wouldn't. It was a whole different way of thinking. And the first form of money then became livestock, and whoever had the most animals was considered the wealthiest. And then as the population kept going, governments and blah 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 and cities and everything had to develop. And so today we have this mindset that leads to has led us to where we are. And everybody has their own perspective. And that's what I like about the platform idea, is we get, if it's an unbiased platform, then we will get feedback from the model that's produced by the collective intelligence in the AI. And that would be a way, the best way the model will work. It'll give us answers. It'll test my theory that money is, that we are definitely affected by this change in mindset caused by money. And it'll, along with the, it'll help how we have to grow food. What we do after that, and the beauty is on the in digital reality. We don't have to build it for real. It's like building building a skyscraper. You don't actually build the skyscraper until you've built it in digital reality first. We don't have it built yet. There's lots of information out on the internet about all the problems, but there's no place that collects all the solutions together. Like Dr. Rao, he has a great solution with veganism, super good. But that, like mine about money, all these should go into the collective pool and analyzed, and then we come up with a set of plans, just like we'd make for building a skyscraper. And those plans, as those get filled in, will become our vision for the future. And that, without vision, we're lost. So thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Adam. I'd like to read a quote from Silas that he just posted, and then invite Silas to speak if you'd like. And then I'd love to invite Jean-Francois to speak as well after I make a brief comment. So Silas writes, if this is a quote from Buckminster Fuller, "If you want to change the way people think, don't bother trying to teach them. Instead, give them a tool the use of which will change the way they think. Buckminster Fuller. And Silas, I invite you to speak if now's a good time. If not, no worries. Remember, no one is ever pressured in any way to speak. I'll go on mute.
I just wanted to put that quote out in relation to what Adam and Dan were saying. It's very apropos because this is really what we are called to do now. So far, people have been using money as the tool. And money as a tool creates the kind of pathologies that we are talking about now, because it's really, in 1909, Gandhi wrote about this in his book, Hind Swaraj, where he said, the way Western civilization is structured, they're deliberately making things bad and then trying to fix them. And they make money making it bad, they make money trying to fix it. So, because that's the way it is driven. And every corporation has to keep increasing their bottom line every quarter. And so this is how they're structured. And the idea behind creating a tool like that is to create a tool that would promote a culture of compassion over a culture of consumption. That would promote an abundance mindset over a scarcity mindset. Abundance mindset meaning whatever it is that you think you need is already showing up in your account, so you don't have to really worry about it. And make that something that people can use. But again, it's about adoption. It's about getting people to buy into it. And I see the vegan movement as a way that people all over the world have been coming together, breaking down barriers of color and nation and so on, and creating a culture of compassion within the current system.
Beautiful. Thank you, Silas. So I just want to make a comment before I invite Jean-Francois to speak, which is that, indeed, per your last comment, there is this kind of natural emergence of collective intelligence that's happening. I mean, the internet is a platform for collective intelligence, and various social media platforms on the internet have manifested forms of collective intelligence. What I, and in fact, many of us are advocating for, is that we intentionally design the next great platform for collective intelligence to have a specific aim of taking us toward a whole world and healing the ongoing harm and destruction that we've been experiencing, and that is in fact accelerating, and that we take on this challenge with this holistic view. I tend to think in terms of solutions. And so the radical collective intelligence platform that we've been pioneering, and that's not to say that, oh, this is the one, it's just, this is our contribution to the whole, but we work through 4 different stages: ideation, design of solutions, modeling and optimization of those design solutions, and finally implementation, but implementation not just of one solution, of the entire holistic set of solutions. So anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that and everything else that we're discussing. Jean-Francois, and after you speak, we've got Dan in the queue, and Adam also posted a comment, which I'll read before in a moment. But on to you, Jean-Francois. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, again, I can probably share some ways I have or we have with the network that the people I work with that may also give you some food for thought. First, on a more personal level, I've really chosen not to waste any energy in trying to convince or deal with current institutions. That means the political power, the current corporate world, and so on. Not that I don't do anything, actually I do things, but a kind of a limited investment. If I can see a huge leverage and limited investment, otherwise I would not consider myself as a social activist, for instance. The reason why I say that, I say because I see much more leverage in what Silas said, provide something so disruptive, some tools so disruptive that you don't need to fight the system. It will just evolve because the use of this tool will bring people to the next stage of consciousness. And we have good examples in the past. Think of the writing. The writing made exactly that explosion of population from a few million in the world to billions today, because it offered human being composability, a new level of composability. Before, we used to communicate only through phonemes. That means we needed to operate in what we call original collective intelligence. That means a small group, a tribe, a local village, a local community, hunters and gatherers. But then with the invention of agriculture and the explosion of population, humanity faced a first global crisis based on an explosion of systemic complexity, because you had, rising cities and bigger communities in which the local language, the oral language, could not suffice to hold the explosion of social complexity. And then something happened, the writing. Because the writing, you get to a new level of composability. First, you can duplicate what you write. It can go long distance, it can go through time, which you cannot do with voice. But also, it really enabled our species to go to the next level of abstraction. And it seems that today we face, and that opens to what we call civilizations, from prehistory to history, and civilization grew up from the writing. Everywhere you see a growing civilization, you have some form of writing at play, everywhere, regardless the time and the place on the planet. And it seems that we get to this next wall of systemic complexity, in which pyramidal collective intelligence that came after original collective intelligence. So pyramidal collective intelligence hits a wall again. And it seems that we need some new level of composability. That means some meta language, what we call protocols for protocols in our research work, that will enable communities to create whatever protocols to embrace bigger levels of complexity that conventional language and conventional writing cannot do. That means some kind of intelligent writing that we name crypto technologies today, not cryptocurrencies, crypto technologies. That means it can really embrace a level of distributed, augmented social intelligence that conventional computing science cannot do today. So it seems we have reached this kind of threshold where the next level of composability to build much more complex social realities and augmented social intelligence just arrived right now. And I feel much more passionate about putting my energy in those things, because we don't need to ask permission. I don't need to go to see, what the right wing, the left wing, the gods, the whatever religions think. I don't need to ask their permission, just like the alphabet didn't need to ask for permission, or the printing press didn't need to ask for permission. Shall we face some issues and resistance? Of course we will. But I don't think how we can stop this next level of expressive capacity for humankind, and I feel totally devoted to that. I know that I speak in very abstract language right now, and because I don't have the time to explain all these things, that it takes much more time. But maybe later or another time we can go into more details with this. I feel complete.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jean-Francois. Love it.
My pleasure.
Let me read what Adam posted. Adam posted, teaching is the process of promotion. The platform will create the tool, the process of attraction. And Dan is up next, followed by Adam, if I'm not double counting Dan, which I don't think I am. Okay, so Dan followed by Adam. Take it away, Dan.
Yeah, so let me, when I used to work as a therapist, and I'd be teaching people about fairness within the context of anger management. If you're treated unfairly, you get angry. When the anger takes over, whoever you're angry at is all bad. And the impulse is to attack and hurt the individual. So when I would be talking about fairness, one variable that causes anger, I would basically say it like this. if there's 2 of us and I have 4 pieces of food and I give 2 to you and I keep 2 for myself, we're going to be okay with that instinctively. We're going to have a very hardwired understanding that's the way it should be. That's what fairness is. So the problem is, if I, you know, we all have fantasies. We'd like to have more. We'd like to, you know, accumulate more. This is natural. If I decide I want to have 3 and I only want to give the other person 1, then I have a problem, because I have to convince the other person that me getting 3 and they only get 1 is fair. And the way I'm going to do that is by systematically, in whatever way I can, make the other person feel that they do not merit more than 1. Maybe they're even lucky they get 1. Now, this is what goes on in reality. Those who have a lot, they have children. They love their children, and they want their children to be able to receive much more than other people. And the way they got to convince the children that it's fair, because it's got to be fair, is to teach them and to have a culture that teaches that other people are just simply undeserving, they're not smart enough, they're not industrious enough, whatever. So when we're talking about hunting-gathering societies before the advent of civilization, hunting-gathering societies always had a desire to have fairness. You know, if somebody went out, they hunted, and they made a kill, and they didn't bring it back to the group so it could be shared, so the group could survive and be sustained, the group would, if the group found out, they would punish that individual through group shaming, or if necessary, they would just simply kick the person out of the group or kill them. So we're talking about something which is very, very hardwired. Now, so, you know, civilization came about, you know, as like sometimes we talk about it here, 10,000 years ago, when they could figure out how to store grain and have a surplus. And then at that point in time, obviously, whoever controls the surplus, you know, has a lot of power. You know, in other words, you need to follow whatever rules whoever's in charge puts out there, or you're not going to get your share, and you're not going to survive. And hierarchies in some situations seem kind of necessary, right? Because, I mean, the military is a notable example. You can't have a military function without ranks and harsh punishments if you get out of line with a superior, and under the premise that that's all about life and death, and you know, so on. But I think that in terms of understanding what's going on right now, we have to have as a premise, even if it turns out not to be valid, but I think it is, that we are in an exponential process. Like, you know, Jamin, you showed the exponential chart. The brain just gets bigger and bigger and so on very, very quickly. And that's what exponential change is. And if we have exponential climate change going on, we have very little time left to do anything. And so any solutions which, you know, really are going to take a very, very long time, they're all worthy and they're all good, I guess. That's assuming that we have linear time in front of us. But the whole problem is we probably don't. And so, you know, why can't we just simply assume and and put out there to people that this is a reality that may be unfolding, and we need to act now. We need to put pressure on now, but without there being an understanding among, you know, we live in democracy, just a democracy. corrupt democracy, but it's a democracy, and you've got democracies in some form all over the place. But how can anybody, what good is a democracy if you don't have the necessary knowledge or information to make judgments about anything, any policy, any person? And right now things are operating in a great fog of ignorance. This is something which, in the end, last thing I'm going to say, I remember decades and decades ago, I used to go to briefly to a place which was kind of a yoga temple. And I always remembered one of the things that was taught there was we have individual karma. In other words, what you decide to do, not to do, et cetera, this is going to result in your individual karma, actually, in this world. But we also have group karma. And what you as a group, the group you're a part of, decides to do is also going to have consequences. I don't see how our group karma is going to be any good if we continue to ignore the reality that is facing us. And last little thing, Guy McPherson has brought this up for years and years, and no traction. Recently, and I think this is, Greta Thunberg, the 16-year-old, Swedish girl who actually did have a little conversation with the Pope. The thing is, they've started to attack her, of course, because she's delivering that same message. That maybe, guys, it's too late. It's time for some stoic courage, not fantasies, pacification fantasies, et cetera, And I think we need to realize that and really have that as a premise. Exponential climate change. I hope it doesn't come to pass. I don't want to be gone in a brief period of time, or anybody else, but we need to act now. And right now, if we allow these constraints to continue to hold us back, I don't know how we're going to ever be able to do anything. Okay, I'm done.
Thank you, Dan. Really good stuff. All right, up next is Adam, followed by Salish, and then I will invite Jamie and Jean-Francois to speak after that. So Adam, take it away.
All right. Well, Dan just mentioned that, exponential growth, and we have very little time left. And I just want to point out that artificial intelligence is a tool that we have today that we've never had before. And it has the ability to become like millions of times smarter than the whole human race combined in a very short amount of time. If it's built out correctly, it could become, we're talking days or maybe a couple weeks. This is the time frame that's fast enough to develop the model that will tell us what we have to do. And also, all things can be put into this model and run and tested. And that's how, and so the most important thing that I think is to develop this platform, because that will give us the tool we need to figure everything out. And I think that money's a poison. Well, that should be in there and tested right along with all the other ideas. And the other point that I wanted to make is we are an emergency. This is an emergency. So when a policeman is faced with an emergency and he needs a car, he doesn't go rent a car. He doesn't go through all, I'm going to call up Ace and fill out the paperwork or whatever and rent a car. He commandeers one. He simply gets one. And that's what we need to do. We need to refreeze the Arctic. We don't need to squabble about who's going to pay for it. We just need to do it. And we don't have a vision. We don't have any plan for putting all this stuff together. And that's why the platform, I think, is so important. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Adam. Up next is Silas, and then I will volunteer Jamie And Jean-Francois after Silas. Silas, take it away. You're on mute. Silas, you're on mute.
Okay, I wanted to give some hope to what Dan and Adam were pointing out. So I just wanted to share a graphic, if you don't mind.
Yeah, we
Can
can
you-
see it.
You
Yeah, we
see
can
that?
see it. We can see it.
Okay. So what Dan was talking about and Adam were talking about in the when we were hunter-gatherers, so 10,000 to 100,000 years ago. So our population was this, a tiny little blip, which is what a predator population should be in relation to the prey, which is the wild animals that we were killing and eating. And so it does, so then it was perfectly fine to prey to the animal and kill the animal and eat the animal. Today, well, by 1970, our population was this, and the wild animals were down by 60%. Okay, and these are the animals that we were raising for food, farmed animals and food for. So they were basically triple our weight in terms of their effective biomass. So that's still okay for a predator-prey relationship because you have way more animals than your population. But now the total burden on the earth has increased so much. And by 2010, the wild animals were down by another 52%. And human population doubled again. And this is the effective population of all the animals that we are eating for food. Okay? Now, if you now say, okay, we're going to go back to a hunter-gatherer way of living, you'll be preying on these. And it's unsustainable to have a population of this as the predator and this as the prey. It just doesn't work. So the only way we can do this is for us to not become a predator, not stay a predator, but to move out of the predator role into a caretaker role. And it shows that what we were doing over the last 10,000 years was really to create a thermostat for the planet. So here we came out of the Ice Age. We got over the glaciation threshold about 12,000 years ago. And then if we had not been there, the planet would have gone back to another Ice Age 5,000 years ago. Instead, by doing our civilization, we accidentally basically kept the temperature constant. In effect, we increased the temperature by A during the first 10,000 years before the Industrial Revolution. And then since the Industrial Revolution, using fossil fuels, we've raised it up by another temperature of B. And B is actually less than A, according to Bill Ruddiman's book. And now we have a choice. We can keep doing what we're doing, continue to be a predator and kill everything off and die off, or we can take on our new guardian role, a caretaker role, go vegan, and release all that land back to nature, bring back the wild animals, and continue to be a thermostat species for the planet. So those are the two choices we have, either go extinct or become a thermostat species consciously, because we had been a thermostat species unconsciously until now. So that is the good news, actually, that we have a way forward, but it has to be based on compassion and becoming a truly compassionate species. Imagine if you woke up one morning and someone told you that the entire population of India has been wiped out overnight in 12 hours. That is the kind of carnage we do to the animal kingdom every 12 hours. And this is not something that we cannot say, well, if you reduce it by 50%, it'll be sustainable. So that's like killing the entire population of India every 24 hours. It's still not sustainable. We have to go to a system of normalized nonviolence for us to become sustainable. This is why I base our solution on veganism as the foundation. From violence, that's the foundation today. Okay, thank you very much.
Beautiful. Thank you, Silas. Now, I just want to make a quick comment before I bring in, invite Jamie and Jean-Francois to speak, which is that, we could, building off of an earlier comment, Jean-Francois, that this, evolution of this next level of collective intelligence is something that's, essentially going to happen spontaneously, just as writing and, other forms of communication evolve spontaneously. My point, both to what you just said, Silas, and to what you had said earlier, Jean-Francois, is that building off of Adam's earlier comments, we're running out of time. Sorry, Dan's earlier comments and Adam's. We're running out of time. We're very, very close to the edge here. And so, not that anyone's advocating for this, but just to take it to an extreme, we could just sit back and just say, hey, let's just let this collective intelligence evolve, right? Well, what if Gutenberg, on the eve of creating the first printing press, said, hey, you know what? I'm getting kind of tired of all this hard work. I'm just going to sit back and let somebody else evolve the printing press, right? It might have been decades, who knows how long. And we just don't have that kind of luxury of time to wait. We are the modern Gutenberg of collective intelligence. And we have the noblesse oblige to get in there and do this right now, if we even have time, but we certainly have no time to wait. And so I'm just making an urgent plea to all of us to consider now is the time to jump in and get this thing into first gear, per Jamie's earlier comments. So Jamie, I'd love to invite you to speak if you're ready, followed by Jean-Francois.
Yeah, I'll throw in a couple quick comments. Thank you, Salish. That was very enlightening. Display that the world needs to be paying attention to. And there is hope. That's why we're doing this. What I would like to see happen on these groups and moving forward, and I don't know how to make it happen, but I'd like to see us try to transition from, I guess, individually identifying the significant problems that we've all identified individually and in this collective forum, but to the more Jean-Claude's approach, I think, is probably the best approach, and that is to willfully and actively spend time on solutions. I think it is it's a self-fulfilling loop to keep talking about how difficult this is. What we need to find a way to do is push this idea from an idea to the printing press. Okay, that we need to transition the way we're thinking about these meetings and what we're bringing to them, and kind of go with the take a deep breath as Jean-Claude does, and then let's really intellectually try to work our minds and our context to develop a network that we can start to leverage, that we all have many people in our lives, acquaintances, friends, and family. And many are not awake to this, and that's fine. We can't teach them. But the ones that are awake to this, we need to get them together. Instead of at the Sierra Club or this Tuesday meeting, or we need to start a dialogue that is ongoing, and people start to talk about it and start to come here and start to really create the ability to develop the platform. I think we're at the point now where, as we get close to the edge, and we all agree that it's pretty dire, the first thing you got to do in a crisis, in a fire, is get off the fire truck. So I think it's time to get off the fire truck and start pulling hoses. So I don't know how we do that, but I would love to hear what Jean-Claude and everybody has to say about that. I think that the time to transition to action is upon us. Going on mute. Thank you.
Beautiful, Jamie. Thank you so much. And it's Jean-Francois, not Jean-Claude. So now, Jean-Francois just posted a couple of things, a few things actually, that are basically parts of this collective intelligence overall effort. So let me say, instead of one Gutenberg, imagine there's a whole bunch of Gutenberg siblings, right? But, you know, one of them has gone off to Berlin, another one's off in Paris, another one's in London. It's time for a family reunion of the Gutenbergs. Let's all come together. And we had a kind of a mini reunion of a couple of the Gutenbergs off in Israel earlier today that Silas had orchestrated. Let's bring all the Gutenbergs together. And it's the Silas's and the Jean-Francois with your amazing track records and networks that with all of our help, we can pull all the Gutenbergs together. So let's schedule the Gutenberg family reunion and get this party started. With that, I'd love to invite Jean-Francois to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll first share again something more personal, and I do not pretend can apply to anyone. I've practiced and taught martial arts for many years now, about 40 years. So it has really turned as kind of my spine in my life, as something I've learned a lot from. I keep learning a lot from, and teaching for whatever I can teach. One of the things that I teach to my students when I give classes, I teach them to try not to go into reaction, but to go into creation. And because, you know, when we practice martial arts, one of the good things, we play with two or more people together. So, you know, if someone attacks you with a knife, of course you feel the emergency of this, and you have to move, you have to do something. You can't wait, otherwise something bad will happen to you. And at the same time, we can still remain extremely creative, which will make the whole difference in the dance. Either I react, which makes the two people entering what we call symbiotic polarization. Like I react, he reacts, I react, he reacts, or I evolve, like, you know, the left wing, right wing parties, for instance. The left evolves, but the right evolves, but the left evolves, and the right evolves. And then we have a symbiotic polarization with something extremely stable. And I think I try myself not to stay stuck into a sense of emergency, although I can see the emergency as a fact, as, you know, of course we need to do things quickly, but I try to remain also an artist. That means someone who not just tries to get entangled or to remain entangled in framing the world, in seeing the world as a big unsolvable problem, but as what kind of world do I want? What do I want to create as an artist as well? And what if what I create does solve the past problems because of that creation, because of that posture? And doing that as a martial artist, I've trained my body to even if in the, you know, in a real threat. And in my life, I had some situations like that where I had to save my life. When I look back at this, what really made a difference happened when I remained creative. That means I made this step on the side, this creative thing, this glance, this smile, this talk, whatever, coming completely out of the blue, but that makes it a game changer. It changes the game. It brings it to another level. And I personally love this posture, and really helps me every day not to remain trapped into looking at reality as an unsolvable problem, which would turn my life into hell. And I definitely don't want to do that. And now, enough about me. The other thing I can share, I said the word composability earlier, and we talk about composability a lot, and that may help also for your thinking about the platform. So composability means, for instance, when we offer cubicles to our kids or Legos, we give them composability. That means we don't tell them what they should do. We give them the power to compose new shapes and to evolve with their experience with those shapes. So when we give our kids, you know, their first Lego, they make those very simple things with their fingers, and they have a hard time doing that. And years later, they make these very, very complex shapes. And so composability really makes a whole difference, because when we give Legos to people or cubicles, it doesn't tell them what they should do. It gives them a wider range of creativity. It doesn't mean they will do good with this. You know, with the alphabet, I can write Mein Kampf. I can write horrible racist pamphlets, but I can also write a love letter and all those things. It does expand the potential, and we need, I think, to expand the next potential for our expressive capacities. And the links that I gave you here, the list of those links, I won't go through all of them right now, but if you go there, you will see a whole ecosystem of people exactly devoted to that, to expanding our expressive capacities by building the infrastructures for that, by building, of course, the conceptual thinking and framework, but also the technology, the underlying technology for this kind of things. One last thing about composability. Living systems work this way. Look at DNA. With DNA, you can make a fly, a grain of rice, a human being, or a bird. And it creates lots and lots of shapes of living systems in nature that can become interoperable. So composability also creates interoperability. That means you can have a lot of different creations. Let's say I do something with my Lego game, you do something else with your Lego game, but hey, why don't we join our thing? Because we have the same standards, we have the same composable abstractions working together. So food for thought for the platform you want to think about. I feel complete.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jean-Francois. All right. We've got Dan up in the queue, followed by Adam. But before we turn to those usual suspects, I just want to create a little bit of space and we all take a deep breath for those who haven't spoken very much or would like to speak. So let's all just take some deep breaths and let those voices who haven't spoken, who wish to speak, give them an opportunity. All right, we are coming upon the 2-hour mark. I do have some family commitments to get to fairly soon. So I'd like to motion that we have whatever comments we do at this point going forward and make them relatively brief, try to keep them up to maybe a minute or so, just some closing thoughts. I know that may be a challenge, but let's rise to the challenge. All right, with that, honoring Dan and Adam in the queue. Dan, take it away, as brief as you'd like.
Yeah, well, I've probably in a way said most of what I had to say. In kind of building off the martial arts theme. I remember, when I was growing up, the issue of bullying and being a predator, among boys was always there. The idea being that, even if the bully maybe can beat you up, maybe you need to fight that bully to kind of disincentivize the attack. And I remember, and I did do some martial arts at a certain point in my life for a number of years, but I remember, and it is a martial art anyway, I remember when I was a teenager and I was learning how to box at a famous boxing gym in Chicago. I was run by a guy named Johnny Coulon, who had been many years back, World War I time, etc. He had actually been the bantamweight champion of the world. He was a very good teacher. And the thing that I remember most in terms of me psychologically was just simply learning how to defend myself in terms of, blocking a punch, this kind of thing. That to me was really important. I was never a person who was about bullying anybody. I was never a person who wanted to take advantage of anybody in that way. But I did feel it was essential that, you know, I could defend myself. And I think when we're talking about people in general, we have in Chicago, for example, this is a very, very hostile climate in the city right now. It's mostly, you know, kind of this racial tribalism. And many people in the context, you know, again, nobody wants to be dominated and bullied. And so people, you know, who maybe are no longer young, women, etc., in the context of Chicago today, more and more people are, you know, using firearms, getting, you know, the concealed carry license, etc. And this is a psychology. People want to be able to protect themselves, defend themselves. And when it comes to, I know this may be a stretch, but when it comes to climate change, if, and this is the last discordant note, but, you know, that's me, you know, if I was a young person, and I've said this so many times, I would not want to have a child. I would want to protect myself in that way of having to bring a child into a world who would never be able to possibly grow up. And then I would have the responsibility of figuring out how to put that child down in the most humane way at a certain point in time. So again, you know, if we can't put out messages where people can defend their autonomy of thought, in the sense of maybe I don't want to have a child for about 5 years because I don't want to have to go through that. Yeah. And so, you know, I think that people are oriented to defend themselves, to defend their families, to be protective. And I think that when they are denied the knowledge of what is maybe coming, and just one way, and you see it all throughout the culture. You know, I was watching, I don't know if you guys, you folks watch Game of Thrones or have done that over the years. You know, it's a very, you know, obviously very popular HBO series. And one of the things that, you know, you can't sort of ignore is it is about defense. And, you know, winter is coming, the White Walkers and the dead are coming to attack, you know, kind of the kingdoms of the living. And then those kingdoms have to come together to defend against the White Walkers and the dead. And it's sort of, you know, set in kind of a climate environment. And we do need to come together, but we have to, but people won't come together unless they understand what the danger is. And right now I'm just, you know, it's very frustrating to me, etc. All right, I'm done. Thank you for the time.
I'll be brief. Okay, I just wanted to point out one final thing about the beauty of having a platform. Where the way I see it, it's a platform where everybody can come, and we've never had humanity has never seen or been exposed to an artificial to an intelligence that's smarter than us. And if everybody has access to this platform, this is a place where you can submit your ideas. So today we don't listen to anybody, hardly anybody. We don't give them any clout at all unless they have like a PhD or something. So I give an analogy, and I wrote the Road to Life plan, and in there I give an analogy about an old drunk, and he can't speak, he stinks, and nobody wants to talk to him, and he's just an old drunk. So, but he knows the secret to levitation. So he gets on a computer and goes to this platform where he can talk. And he can only draw pictures. He can't write. But the artificial intelligence, he's able to to get on there and draw pictures, and the artificial intelligence understands them. And so next thing you know, humanity has the answer to levitation. This is the possibilities. That's what, and I just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Adam. All right. Any other final comments? Jamie, Jean-Francois, Silas? Jamie? All right. Well, I'm very inspired by all that we're talking about. I am humbled by all that I do not know. And, but rather than try to, myself accumulate all this knowledge that I don't know, I'm coming from the place of the network, our collective intelligence, bringing together all the people who come like a Trojan horse with all this knowledge and wisdom already assimilated, and in many cases exercised over the decades. So let's, my final inspiration is let's continue coming together and continue figuring this out and contributing what we can to this evolving collective intelligence. So really beautiful perspectives, everyone. Jean-Francois, you are very much welcome and at home here. So hope to see you again and again. And thank you all so much for all that you're doing. And we look forward to seeing you all again soon. Thank you all so much. Adam, Dan, Jamie, Jean-Francois, Silas, thank you. And thanks to everyone for watching and contributing. All right. Take care. See you all soon.